The first sound was a beep, rhythmic, insistent. My eyes fluttered open to a sterile white ceiling, a coma, they'd told me. 6 months stolen from my life after a brutal car crash. My sister, Clara, was dabbing my forehead, her face a mask of practiced concern. My brother, Leo, stood by the window, avoiding my gaze. "Marcus, thank God," Clara whispered, her voice hollow. Later, alone, I tried to access my savings to cover my own medical bills. The banking app flashed a number that made my heart stop. Balance, $17.34. They'd drained it, all $50,000. A cold, bitter smile touched my lips. They forgot. In their greed, they forgot Dad's final instruction, the one whispered only to me. Clara, my older sister, always played the part of the family matriarch after Mom passed. She lived in a sprawling house in the suburbs she couldn't afford, funded by a long-suffering husband and a desperate need to keep up appearances. For her, my savings weren't stolen. They were a necessary resource to maintain the family's social standing. Her concern was just another performance in the grand theater of her life. Then there's Leo, my younger brother, the eternal dreamer. His life was a graveyard of failed startups and get-rich-quick schemes, each one funded by our father and, after his passing, by me. He wouldn't see it as theft. He'd see my 50 grand as overdue seed money for his next guaranteed success, a pittance he felt entitled to. They were a perfect storm of vanity and desperation. To them, I wasn't their brother. I was Marcus Thorne from Argent Financial, their personal bank, the boring, responsible cog whose only purpose was to fund their fantasies. They thought they'd cracked open my life savings. They had no idea they'd just smashed a piggy bank while standing at the door of the vault. Our father, Richard Thorne, wasn't just a successful man, he was a student of human nature. He'd built his empire on predicting how people would act, and he saw his own children with brutal clarity. He loved Clara and Leo, but he was never blind to their flaws. He called it their self-destruction. I remember the last week, in his oak-paneled study. The smell of old books and his faint, spicy cologne filled the air. He was frail, submerged in his favorite leather armchair, but his eyes were as sharp as shards of glass. He'd sent Clara and Leo on some pointless errand, a transparent excuse to speak with me alone. "They'll be back in an hour," he'd said, his voice a low rasp. "Clara will have bought something we don't need, and Leo will have a pitch for a new company that sells designer air." I managed a weak smile. "Dad, don't." "Listen to me, Marcus." He leaned forward, a spark of his old fire igniting. "The Thorne family trust is not a bank, it's a legacy. It's a foundation for generations, not a slush fund for their vanities." He paused, taking a rattling breath. "That's why you're the sole executor, but I've added another layer of security, one the lawyers don't even know about." He slid a single, sealed envelope across the mahogany desk. My name was written on it in his familiar, sharp script. "There is a digital failsafe," he explained. "To activate the trust, to move a single dollar, a password is required. It's a failsafe against lawyers, against hackers, against them." He looked me dead in the eye. "The password is not in that envelope. The question is. Only you know the answer." Quote, my heart hammered against my ribs. "What kind of question?" He smiled, a sad, knowing expression. "Do you remember that rainy Saturday at the cabin? When you were 10, you were frustrated with a puzzle, and I told you a story about a king and 3 locked gates." I remembered it instantly, a silly riddle he'd made up, a memory Clara and Leo had long since forgotten, having been too busy arguing over a video game to pay attention. "The answer to that riddle, son. Word for word. No capitals, no spaces." He sank back into the chair, the effort costing him. "They will bleed you dry, Marcus. They see your responsibility as a weakness. They will see your savings as an appetizer. Don't let them devour the main course. Protect our legacy, even from them." He died 2 days later. And now, lying in this hospital bed, his words echo in my mind, no longer a warning, but a prophecy. They saw my $50,000 as an appetizer. They have no idea how right he was. And they have no idea how hungry I am now. The next afternoon they returned, not together, which was telling. Clara arrived first, carrying a bouquet of funereal lilies and a thermos of soup that smelled of disappointment. She fluffed my pillow, her movements a little too brisk, her smile a little too bright. She was assessing me, checking for cracks in my cognition. "How are you feeling, sweetie?" she asked, her voice oozing a practiced sympathy. I let my head loll to the side, my voice a deliberate, reedy whisper. Tired and confused. I paused, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable for her. "Clara, I tried to check my bank account yesterday to see about, these bills." I gestured vaguely at the machines that were still my constant companions. It said the balance was empty. Her smile didn't falter, but a flicker of irritation crossed her eyes. "Oh, Marcus, don't you worry your head about that. We handled it." "Handled it?" "Yes. There were so many unexpected expenses while you were away. The mortgage on my house, some of Dad's lingering estate taxes, things were getting tight. We had to pool our resources. Think of it as a temporary family loan. We were just protecting the family name." "Protecting her reputation," I corrected silently. "Funding her insecurities." Just then, Leo breezed in, smelling of expensive cologne and desperation. He clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture of forced camaraderie. "Heard you were back with us, big brother." "Fantastic." Quote. Clara shot him a warning look. "I was just explaining our financial arrangements to Marcus." Leo scoffed. "Arrangements? Clara, don't dress it up." "Marcus, I invested it. Your 50 grand is the seed money for the deal of a lifetime, a decentralized AI-driven logistics platform. It's pre-revenue, but the valuation is insane. I've tripled our money on paper already." He beamed, his eyes shining with the manic glaze of a true believer. They couldn't even coordinate their lies. A family loan versus a high-risk venture capital play. One was an act of familial duty, the other an act of financial genius. Both were theft. I looked from one to the other, letting my confusion appear to deepen. "But I don't understand. How? My password, the security questions." This was the moment of truth. Clara took a deep breath, shifting into her matriarchal, condescending tone. The one she used when explaining things to people she considered simpletons. "When it became clear your condition was long-term, I petitioned the court. As your next of kin, they granted me temporary power of attorney. It was for your own protection, Marcus, to manage your affairs since you couldn't." She patted my hand. "It was all perfectly legal. We signed the transfer papers for you." My blood ran cold. It wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of weakness. It was premeditated. They had gone to a lawyer. They had stood before a judge. They had used the very legal system designed to protect me as a weapon against me. They had forged my life with a pen, draining my resources while I lay helpless, and called it protection. I let my eyes close, feigning exhaustion. "Oh," I whispered. I see. Thank you for looking out for me." Leo grinned, victorious. "See, Clara? He gets it. Don't worry, Marcus. You're going to be a rich man." Clara looked relieved, her performance complete. They believed it. They actually believed I'd accepted their paper-thin justifications. They saw my silence as acquiescence, my weakness as consent. They left soon after, convinced they'd successfully managed the situation. They thought the power of attorney gave them the ultimate authority. They had no idea it was just the key to a janitor's closet in a skyscraper they didn't even know existed. They'd won the battle for my checking account, and in doing so they had given me the one thing I needed to win the war for everything else: clarity. For the next 2 weeks I became the perfect patient. I was a model of quiet compliance. When the physical therapist came, I worked until my muscles screamed. framing my grim determination as a desire to not be a burden. Every painful step on the parallel bars was a step closer to retribution. I let Clara fuss over me, bringing me bland food and even blander gossip. I listened to Leo's breathless phone calls about his AI platform, offering weak but encouraging murmurs. I was a ghost in my own life, and they were too busy dancing on my grave to notice. They mistook my silence for shock, my exhaustion for defeat. They didn't understand. In my world at Argent Financial, silence isn't surrender, it's observation. It's the quiet before you liquidate a failing asset. And my siblings had just become the most failing asset I'd ever managed. One afternoon, Clara was complaining about the cost of my private room. "It's just astronomical, Marcus. We'll have to have a serious talk about the family finances once you're on your feet." I looked at her, my expression carefully curated to be one of weary concern. The trust. Dad's trust. Isn't that supposed to handle things like this? Hope and greed warred in her eyes. "Well, yes, eventually. Mr. Abernathy, the estate lawyer, says it's all in order. It's just a matter of filing the final paperwork to activate it now that you're back." She patted my arm, a gesture meant to be comforting but felt like a brand. They were waiting for me to be well enough to sign the papers that would make them rich. The moment she left, I had a nurse bring me my personal effects. My phone was in the bag, its battery dead. I plugged it in, my hands shaking not with weakness but with adrenaline. An hour later it buzzed to life. I ignored the dozens of texts. I had one call to make. I found the number in my contacts. "Abernathy, Fitzwilliam and Associates." A crisp voice answered. "Mr. Abernathy's office." "This is Marcus Thorne," I said, my voice intentionally a little raspy. "I'm calling for Mr. Abernathy." There was a pause. Then the old lawyer himself was on the line, his voice a mix of surprise and professional sympathy. "Marcus, my boy, we heard. How are you feeling?" "Getting there, Bill. Listen, I'm still a bit foggy on things. My sister mentioned the trust. She said it was just a matter of paperwork?" "That's right," Abernathy said smoothly. "Your father made you the sole executor. A wise choice. Once you're discharged, we'll have you come in, sign the execution documents, and the trust will be formally activated. Standard procedure." I held my breath. "So, just a signature, nothing else? No other security measures?" I could almost hear him shrug over the phone. "No, it's all very straightforward. Richard wanted you in clear control. A signature is all the law requires." The line went quiet as he waited for my response. "Thank you, Bill," I said, my voice betraying nothing. "That's very clear. I appreciate it." I ended the call and stared at the white ceiling, but I no longer saw a sterile room. I saw a chessboard, and for the first time since waking up, I saw all the pieces. Abernathy was a pawn, unaware of his role. My siblings were opposing knights, charging foolishly across the board. And I was the player they had forgotten was in the game. My recovery became my singular mission. Physical therapy was no longer a chore, it was a training montage. Brenda, my therapist, pushed me, and I pushed back harder. The burning in my muscles was a welcome distraction from the cold fire in my gut. "You're driven," she commented one afternoon as I forced myself through another set of leg presses. I just grunted in response. She thought I was fighting to walk again. I was fighting to stand over them. A few days before my scheduled discharge, Clara and Leo appeared together. The strain was showing. Leo's suit was sharp, but his eyes were bloodshot. Clara's smile was stretched so tight it looked painful. Their venture capital fairy tale and family loan fantasies were colliding with the reality of bills and expenses. They needed the trust, and they needed it now. "So," Leo began, dispensing with the pleasantries, "we should probably set that meeting with Abernathy, just to get things finalized." Clara nodded eagerly. "The sooner we activate the trust, the sooner we can get everything settled. It's for the best, Marcus. For the whole family." Quote, "This was the moment. I let my shoulders slump, performing weakness one last time. I rubbed my temples, a gesture of a man at his limit. "You're right," I said, my voice a tired rasp. I can't keep thinking about all this. It's too much." I looked from one to the other, my eyes deliberately unfocused. "Please, just set it up. Let's get it over with." The wave of relief that washed over them was palpable. It was nauseating. Leo clapped his hands together, a sharp, jarring sound. "Perfect! I'll call his office now. How about next Friday? Gives you a week to settle in at home." "Fine," I mumbled, turning away to face the window, a clear dismissal. "Handle it." They scurried out, their hushed, excited whispers trailing behind them. They thought they were taking care of everything. They had no idea they were simply confirming their own appointments with destiny. The day I left the hospital was overcast and chilly. Clara was waiting with her oversized SUV, ready to ferry the invalid home. "I've already made up the guest room, sweetie. You can't be on your own." "No, thank you," I said. My voice was calm, level, and utterly foreign to her. I stood fully dressed in my own clothes, my hospital bag in my hand. For the first time in 6 months, I felt solid. "I've called a cab." The look on her face, a cocktail of shock and wounded authority, was the first real payment I'd received on the $50,000 they owed me. It was a small, petty dividend, but it was delicious. Before she could protest, I was walking toward the exit, not once looking back. My apartment was a sterile time capsule of my former life. I spent the next 6 days not just resting, but recalibrating. I logged into my Argent Financial terminal, the complex data streams and market analytics flooding my senses like a homecoming. I wasn't just a coma patient anymore. I was Marcus Thorne, and this was my arena. In the bottom drawer of my study desk, beneath a decade of tax returns, lay the sealed envelope from my father. I slid it open with a silver letter opener. Inside was not a password, but a single thick card. In my father's elegant script, it held only one sentence. The question, "What is the only thing a king can give but never take back?" A cold smile spread across my face. I remembered that rainy Saturday at the cabin like it was yesterday. Me, 10 years old and furious at a jigsaw puzzle. Leo and Clara, screaming over a video game. My father pulling me aside, distracting me with a riddle. A story they never heard, because they were too consumed by their own selfish noise. And an answer they would never, ever guess. I spent the next 48 hours on the phone with a competing firm, one with no connection to my family or Abernathy. I was a name on the phone, a voice of quiet authority. I established a new, private, ironclad trust. I designed its architecture with the lethal precision I normally reserved for hostile takeovers. It was a financial fortress, with sub-accounts, trigger-based disbursements, and investment protocols so complex they'd make a seasoned lawyer weep. I was building a lifeboat, and there was only room for one. The morning of the meeting, I chose my suit carefully. Dark charcoal gray. A suit that didn't ask for respect, it commanded it. The man I saw in the mirror was not a victim. He was an asset manager about to liquidate a very, very bad investment. I placed my father's envelope, the card with the question, and the paperwork for the new, empty trust into my leather briefcase. The snap of the latches echoed in the silent apartment. It was the sound of a vault door closing. The appetizer was over. They were about to find out just how hungry I was. Abernathy's office was a cathedral of old money, all polished mahogany, and the scent of leather-bound books. It was designed to intimidate. For me, it felt like home. Leo and Clara were already seated opposite Abernathy's enormous desk, looking like vultures waiting for a will to be read. When I walked in, they both straightened. The change in my posture, the cut of my suit, the look in my eyes. It wasn't the broken man they'd left at the hospital. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Clara's face before she masked it with a tight, proprietary smile. "Marcus, darling, you look well," she said, her tone implying my recovery was an inconvenience she'd graciously overlooked. Leo just nodded, his eyes fixed on the stack of documents on the desk. Good. Let's get this done. I ignored them, extending a hand to the lawyer. Bill, thank you for seeing us. Abernathy, a man whose entire life was a performance of gravitas, shook my hand warmly. Of course, Marcus. A formality, really. Your father's instructions were impeccable. He gestured for me to sit. As the sole executor, you just need to sign the execution documents here and here. Once signed, I will initiate the protocol to activate the Thorne family trust. The assets will then be under your direct management. He pushed the papers toward me. Clara leaned forward, her finger tracing a line on the page. It's just a standard executor's oath, sweetie. Sign right there. She was still playing the role of my handler. I picked up the heavy, gold-plated fountain pen. I didn't look at her. I looked at the signature line. The ink flowed, black and final. I signed both documents with a steady hand, then slid them back across the desk. Leo let out a breath he'd clearly been holding. Excellent, Abernathy boomed, stamping the documents with an official-looking seal. He swiveled in his high-backed leather chair to face a sleek, modern terminal on his credenza. Now, I'll just input the execution command, and the trust will be live. He typed with practiced efficiency. Clara was practically vibrating with anticipation. Leo was already staring at his phone, no doubt checking his bank account for a miraculous influx of capital. Abernathy stopped typing. He frowned. He typed again. A small, red error message blinked on his screen. Odd, he murmured. A security block. Let me just re-authenticate. He went through the process again. The same red message appeared. Protocol denied. Failsafe engaged. Abernathy's professional calm began to fray at the edges. He picked up the thick trust portfolio, flipping through the pages with a rustle of expensive paper. Richard, you clever old fox. He stopped on a page near the back, an addendum I knew he'd skimmed over and dismissed. Ah, here we are. Addendum 7.4b. Final asset transfer requires secondary authorization via the Thorne digital key. A verbal password known only to the executor. The silence in the room was absolute. Clara's face had gone from greedy triumph to pale confusion. Leo looked up from his phone, his get-rich-quick fantasy crashing into a brick wall. A password? Clara stammered, her voice shrill. What password? You never mentioned a password. I wasn't aware of one, Abernathy said, looking at me, his expression a mixture of professional embarrassment and newfound respect. Your father's final instruction, it seems. All eyes fell on me. I leaned back in my chair, allowing myself a small, cold smile. Yes, a password. Well, what is it? Leo demanded, his voice raw with panic. Just say it so we can get our money. Our money? I repeated softly. The words hung in the air like poison. That's an interesting choice of words. You seem to have a habit of confusing my money with yours. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the single card from my father's envelope. I placed it in the center of the mahogany desk. My father was a student of human nature. He knew that a simple lock wouldn't be enough to protect his legacy from his own children. So he used a lock only I could open. I gestured to the card. The password is the answer to a question. The question is on that card. Clara snatched it. Her eyes scanned the words, her brow furrowed in complete incomprehension. She read it aloud, her voice trembling. What is the only thing a king can give but never take back? Asterisk. She looked at me, her eyes wide with desperation. What is this? A joke? It's a memory, I said flatly. A rainy Saturday at the cabin. I was 10. You and Leo were there. Leo shook his head, frantically searching his memory and finding nothing but static. I don't remember any stupid riddles. Marcus, this is insane. Just give us the password. Guess, I said. My voice was iron. You were so quick to access my life savings. You forged my name with a pen. You stood before a judge and claimed it was for my own protection. You felt entitled to my entitlement, so go on, guess." "His word," Clara blurted out, "a desperate gamble, a king's word." I shook my head slowly, a pitying smile on my lips. Too easy, too obvious. "Power," Leo barked, his face flushing with anger. "Land, the crown itself." "All things that can be taken back," I said, my voice a quiet lecture, cutting through his panic. "Usually by force. You're thinking like conquerors, not kings. Like thieves." Mr. Abernathy sat motionless, the pen still resting in his hand. The professional lawyer was gone. In his place was a man witnessing the final, brilliant move of a long-dead client. A move he hadn't even known was on the board. Clara's face crumpled. The matriarch mask shattered, revealing the desperate, terrified woman beneath. "Love?" she whispered, trying a new tactic, her eyes welling with false tears. "Family?" The sound that escaped my throat was not a laugh. It was colder, sharper. "You dare say that word to me? You, who used the law as a crowbar to pry open my savings while I lay helpless. You who called it a family loan to cover your mortgage. You talk of family?" Leo slammed his fist on the mahogany desk, rattling the pen stand. "This is a sick game, Marcus. Dad didn't want this. He wanted us to be taken care of." "Oh, he absolutely wanted this," I corrected him, my voice dropping to an iron whisper. I rose from my chair, the movement slow and deliberate. "He wanted this exact moment. He wanted proof of what he already knew. My $50,000 wasn't just money. It was bait. And you devoured it without a second thought, proving his every fear correct." I leaned over the desk, my shadow falling over them. "You think this is about a forgotten riddle? It was never about the password. It was about worthiness. That 50 grand was the real test, and you both failed so spectacularly it would have made him weep." I reached out, took the card from Clara's limp fingers, and slid it back into my briefcase. Turning to Abernathy, my tone shifted to pure business. "As executor, I am formally instructing you that the Thorne family trust is to remain dormant. No assets are to be moved or activated until further notice. My father's legacy is secure." I snapped the latches on my briefcase shut, the sound echoing in the stunned silence. I looked at their horrified faces one last time. "You wanted my money so badly," I said softly. "You got it, all $17.34. I do hope it was worth it. So now the tables have turned, and they need this password from me after they drained my savings. I genuinely want to know, what would you do if you were in my shoes?"